Thank you. Good morning. I always get to do I think the most fun part of the morning, but I want to thank Gay again and the hospice team and what good, meaningful work you guys do in the community and the surrounding counties. If you've ever been touched by hospice, you know what it means. So you do good work. So thank you very much. I will say, I'm not sure that WWE wrestler you brought up. I kind of know Ric Flair, but I think if you'd have brought up Bill Dundee, Jerry Lawler, Coco Beware, and Cowboy Frankie Lane. Tojo Yadamoto, there's a good one. That's going deep right there. And thank you again, Kathy, for what you did this morning. Your prayer was really inspirational, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And then I get to introduce our speaker today, Senator Joe Bowen. And we're so lucky and blessed to have a leader like Joe from Owensboro, and then also representing the state of Kentucky. So thank you. Joe Bowen was elected to the Kentucky State Senate in 2010, representing the 8th District, which encompasses Davis, Hancock, and McLean counties. Prior to his election to the Senate, Senator Bowen served in Kentucky House of Representatives from 2005 to 2006. Senator Bowen currently serves as the chair of the State and Local Government Committee. He also serves as co-chair of the State Employee Pension Oversight Board. Senator Bowen is on the Licensing and Occupations Committee and Transportation Committee, the Health and Welfare Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Subcommittee on Energy. That's a lot, Senator. He also serves as a liaison member of the Budget Review Subcommittee, General Government, Finance, and Public Protection. Senator Bowen has served as chairman for the Owensboro YMCA Board, Kentucky State Parks Foundation Board. He has also been a board member of the Owensboro Davis County Hospital Incorporated. Senator Bowen is an alumni of the National Conference of Advanced Leadership Skills. After graduating from Davis County High School in 1968, he attended the University of Kentucky and graduated with a degree in business administration in 1972. Senator Bowen has long been an advocate of youth sports, serving as both a coach and administrator for several youth sports organizations. Joe Bowen was born April 22nd, 1950, so if you'd like to put that in your phone as a reminder, you can wish him happy birthday next year, and was a longtime small business owner. He and his family operated Bowen Tire, which was founded by his father in 1949. Senator Bowen resides in Owensboro with his wife, Vicki. He is the father of 2 children, Adam and Joy, and the grandfather of 5 grandchildren. Help me welcome Senator Joe Bowen.
Good morning. It's really great to see such a crowd. You know, I really didn't expect this many people to be here this morning to talk about pensions. Most people in Frankfort run away from pensions, and they have for too long. I appreciate the bio, Wade. You know, I've gotten to know Wade the last couple of years, and I could hear him mumble under his breath. I wish I could add a couple of things to that bio. You know, the way bios work is you get to furnish the bio to the group that you're speaking to prior to speaking to them. So if you can't, I mean, you know, you can make yourself sound pretty impressive under that arrangement. So, but I was struck by the fact that hospice and of course Kathy Mullins with Honor and Remember, and then I see Virginia Braswell back there with hospice, and you know Habitat, I'm sorry, Habitat, I saw the hospice people. Sorry about that, Virginia. I know you've been with Habitat since way back our days at Zion Church. But, you know, this resume, this bio that Wade talked about would be a lot more impressive if it said that I had volunteered at hospice, or I'd volunteered at Habitat, or I'd helped Kathy Mullins with Honor and Remember. So I would suggest to you that it's probably those folks out there in the real world with no bio at all that are doing all the heavy lifting. So I salute you folks. You do good work. You do important work. You're the wheels of this community and of this state and of this country that keep it all going. So I salute you this morning, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's good to be facing west. You know, Candace kind of threw me a curveball. I walked into the other room over there, and I thought, boy, this is going to be easy. I was going to talk to my wife, Vicki, who's here with me this morning, which we've talked about pensions a lot. She knows more than she ever thought she would. But it's good to be facing west. You know, in Frankfort, we don't face west all the time. It seems like the whole conversation is directed to the east, so it's really fun to be here in front of you all and facing west. And I want to take just a minute and talk to you about this community of ours before we get into pensions, because pensions is a tough topic, let me tell you. I mean, there's not a lot of fun in it. But we got to talk about it because it is so critical and so important. But I want to take just a minute and talk to you about Owensboro. Of course, we opened up the paper this morning and we saw that, we're going to be faced with these tax increases, and I understand that and I get that, and that's a bitter pill to swallow. But I have the opportunity to go all across this state and talk to people because of some of these committees that Wade mentioned earlier, and I talked to people in Covington and Bowling Green and Frankfort and Lexington and Louisville and Henderson and all over. And it never fails that when I leave, somebody comes up to me and they said, boy, I was just in Owensboro, and what a neat town that is. I can't wait to go back. We spent the night there. We enjoyed it so much. You people have so much going on. Well, I think we could all keep a little secret here. There's not that many of us that a secret would be safe in this room. But I dare say there's a lot of Owensboro envy out there across the state of Kentucky. And it's not just from small communities that are striving to be better, but there's a lot of Owensboro envy in some of our bigger communities as well. So we need to embrace that. I know that we do, but we need to continue to support each other and lift each other up and keep this community moving forward. And I really think that we're on the cusp of a lot of really good news. We're working hard. We had a really productive meeting the other day, the mayor and myself and Ed Ray with the Economic Development Secretary. It was really encouraging. I think the future looks really bright for our community, and I'm so proud and so honored to be able to represent you folks in Frankfort. I never dreamed of that opportunity at a younger age, but I'm humbled every day when I get to represent the community that I do. And then I can look at my colleagues and see that they have so much admiration for this community. So that's my little editorial. I just wanted to give that. I don't have the opportunity a lot of times to speak to groups from home. When I go talk to other groups, if it doesn't go so well, it doesn't matter because I can get in my car and go home. Nobody ever knows. But if I fall flat on my face today, I've got nowhere to run to. Pensions is a tough topic. There's nothing funny about it. It's a no-joke situation. It's the greatest fiscal issue that this state has faced in the last half century, maybe ever. And how I wound up on the corner of what I call pensions and pensions in Frankfort is an odd journey, but this is where I am, and it's a result of me being chairman of state and local government and then being appointed as co-chair of the Public Pension Oversight Board. So that's how I became so immersed in this issue. And I apologize to you today that I don't have elaborate slides to show you, that I don't have any glossy handouts to give you. So it's just all going to come from what few notes that I have here. But my knowledge of pensions has come over about a 2 to 3 year period with intense meetings from a lot of experts, from a lot of conversations with people that are in the system, the people that are advising the systems, one-on-one conversations with colleagues in Frankfort in a number of different ways. We currently have a group, and I'm going to go off script because it's just hard to talk about this in a structured way. If I did, it would be more like a math class or calculus to you folks, and you'd probably start running for the exits, and Sheriff Kane would have to bar the doors back there. But we have a group now, PFM, out of Philadelphia, that's auditing the systems. They're analyzing all of our pension systems. And I want to mention to you that what makes this so complex is that there are 8 different systems that the state of Kentucky is responsible for. And most of those retirement systems have a corresponding health benefit as well. So when I talk to you this morning, I would have to talk to you for probably the next year and a half to bring you up to speed on each one of these systems and all the nuances of it. So I'm going to speak to you this morning in aggregate. We're going to combine them all together and explain to you in that manner what the liability is, because really at the end of the day, that's all that really matters to you, is the total liability that this state faces with its pension systems. And back to PFM auditing these groups, the challenge for someone like me is when we have an outside auditor come in and they look at the numbers and they start crunching the numbers, that's the very exercise that they're engaged in. All of this is about numbers for them. But with me, and I've talked to probably every pension group that's involved in the state of Kentucky at one time or another, I look at lives. I can put a face to these challenges. I can put a human being and families and careers. So that makes the challenge that much greater. It's not, with me, it's not just about numbers. It's about human beings and lives. And I can't look at it in that way. I don't have that luxury that somebody that's auditing the system has, to strictly look at the dollars and cents and the number of people involved. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. And when you approach it from that standpoint, it affects the calculus of all of this, because you know behind every one of those numbers there's a family. There's a family that's worked and is depending on these pensions. So it creates a great challenge, because it's not so much, this is a finite issue. At the end of the day, it's a certain dollar liability that we have out there, so it is finite. If we do the math right, we can get there. But it's the political will that's going to make it so challenging. It's the people that are involved in the process and the tough choices that they're going to have to make that's going to bring us a resolution to this issue. And that's where the real challenge is. I'm going to suggest to you also, and I'm going to say this humbly, had it not been for Senate Bill 2, a bill that I sponsored, we wouldn't be where we are today. Senate Bill 2 opened up the doors to these pension challenges. It let us take a look inside of these systems and see just exactly what was going on. And believe it or not, we weren't doing that until just recently. Which leads me to this point. In the year 2000, every one of our pension systems were flush. Every one of our pension systems had all the money that they needed. In the year 2000, CERS, Judge, was funded at a level of 156%. KERS, the most challenged system that we have currently, was funded at 136%. KTRS, our teachers' retirement system, was funded at 95.8%, and if you're at 80%, you're fully funded. So this is from 2000, the year 2000, and when a legislator suggests to you that, oh, you know, it took years to get us in this situation, it's going to take years to get out. No, it didn't. It didn't take us years to get into this situation. It took us 16 years to get to where we are. And nobody was at the wheel. Nobody was at the helm of this thing guiding this ship in the right direction. Now, there's a lot of outside forces that were working on our pension system that created this liability of $40 billion, and that $40 billion is based off the best assumptions that we can have. If we use other assumptions, if we tie our return on our money to a treasury note, then the liability goes up to maybe $75 billion. So we've got the most favorable assumptions pushing this thing down, and we're exposing it as a $40 billion liability, but there's no guarantee that we're going to earn the rate of return that our formula says that we will. So it's a great challenge that we have, and we're going to have to make a lot of hard decisions. Now, what I want to do to you, I want to explain to you the peril that each one of these systems is in currently. And I want to explain to you how we got to where we are. And it's not, I'm only one of 38 that's going to be making a choice on how we get out of this. And there's two groups currently working in Frankfort now, a pension group and a tax reform group. And I'm on the pension side. I pray every night that the folks on the tax reform side are going to get this right, because I will tell you, those of you that are in the business community, we have to get this right. This is has the potential to encumber the whole economy of the state of Kentucky. Look no further than the state of Illinois and see what peril those folks are in. They've got a $350 billion liability. Ours is $40 billion at best, but it's an economy of scale. They've got a lot more people over there than we do in Kentucky. So when you do the math behind it, we're actually ranked as the worst system in the country, depending on who's looking at us. But whether we're the worst or the second worst or third worst, we're in that conversation. And again, this didn't all start until after the year 2000. But currently, in the last 11 years, pensions have grown 5 times faster than revenues in the state of Kentucky. We've had a $7 billion negative cash flow from KRS and TRS, which are the two big ones, the Teachers Retirement System and the Kentucky Employees Retirement System. $7 billion negative cash flow in 10 years. Pensions consume over 13% of our annual budget. Now that's a big number. We have a $10 billion annual budget, and pensions right now, with the best assumptions, are consuming $1.5 billion of that budget. And the really bad news is that it's going to take $700 million more next year than it did last year to fund these pensions. $700 million more. Now you tell me that that's not a challenge? And what's so frustrating to me is we still have people in the system that are deniers. We still have people in the system that are saying today, oh, this is being overstated. It's not really as bad as what we're claiming that it's going to be, but they're protecting a legacy. They're protecting their own legacy when they say that. And reality is upon us. Again, look no further than the state of Illinois. That could happen here in Kentucky. And when it does, if it did, it would have catastrophic effects on the economy of this state. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my grandkids. I don't want it for your grandkids. I don't want to shove this problem off on anybody else. Now, it'd be easy for me to stand up here and say to you this morning, I'm not responsible. I walked into this. But guess what? I'm the one that put the yard signs out. I'm the one that's there now. And so it is my responsibility. In spite of how we got there, it's my responsibility because I'm there now. Our KERS system, that's a Kentucky Employees Retirement System. And again, I told you that there's eight different systems that the state of Kentucky is responsible for. And then we've got these health insurance plans as well. But the one that's in the most peril, the one that's the most challenged, is the KERS non-hazardous. That's your folks out there mowing the highways. That's the folks that are working in all sorts of ways in state government. Is only funded at a 13.8% level, which means, in plain English, that we have about 14 cents in the bank for every dollar of liability. 14 cents to pay off every dollar of liability that we have. The KERS hazardous system is in better shape. The folks that work in hazardous duty jobs, it's funded at a 59.7% level. The CERS, the County Employees Retirement System, which is the biggest system of them all, is funded at a 59% level, but they make the full ARC payment, I would suggest to you too. They pay into the system what they should, and it's still only funded at a 59% level. And CERS is the County Employees Retirement System. The CERS hazardous system is funded at a 57.7% level. The state police system, now imagine this, is funded at a 30.3% level, our state police. The only good news to that is it's a small plan and we could pay as we go for those folks if we had to. The teachers' retirement system, which affects so many of you all, I dare say you can't, just about every family is connected to someone in the education community. It's funded at a level of 54.6%. The judicial system is funded at 71%. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but the legislative system is funded at a 79% level, which that's not easy to say. That's hard to swallow. I'll not make any excuses about it. It's a very small plan. A lot of people never stay long enough to get full benefits. That's part of the reason why it's funded. You know, people come and go in that process, but nonetheless, that's the level of funding in that system. So how did we get there? How did we get from the year 2000, when some systems were funded at 135% level, and they're now down to a 13% level? That seems unimaginable to me. It seemed so unimaginable to me that I filed legislation that was 200 pages thick to get to the root of the problem, to try to understand how on earth could we get to where we are. And I can't believe there weren't more people asking more questions for a longer period of time. Now, most people assume that this is just a function of appropriations, that the General Assembly has been derelict in their responsibility of appropriating the adequate amount of money. But realistically, that's not the issue. It is part of the problem, but it's not as big a part of the problem as what you would imagine. And it surprised me even that it was not as big a part of the problem as I had imagined, because I was like you. I thought, well, the state has not owned up to the responsibility. But things started really heading south in 2006. That's when all the plans really started taking a deep dive. From 2000 to 2006, you could see an erosion, but you didn't see the deep dive like you did in 2006. But between 2006 and now, we had the Great Recession. We had the market crash, and that had catastrophic effect on the systems. But we didn't provide for that, and that's part of the problem. So actual funding from the General Assembly, appropriation from the legislature, really only represents about 15% of the problem. Now, before you start throwing things at me, saying, oh, that can't be, the biggest part of the funding problem was the manner in which we were funding. We had actuaries, and that's the top of the food chain when you're talking about pensions. And I see Jim Tony Fulkerson over there. He knows this. Actuaries are the top of the food chain in pensions. Actuaries are the ones that make the assumptions. They're the ones that provide you the numbers for the formula. And we had actuaries that had unrealistic assumptions. Now, it was not only the fact that they had ambitious returns on investments, unrealistic returns on investments, and some would say, no, wait a minute, if you take a 10-year look back, a 15-year look back, we've done pretty well. Well, you've done pretty well, but you haven't met your benchmark, and when you don't meet your benchmark, you're falling behind. So if you anticipate earning 7% and you only earn 6.5%, and you're saying, well, we almost got there. Well, almost isn't good enough. You got to get there, or your formula is not going to work. But the single biggest problem, the one issue that got us in the most trouble was the way in which we did fund, the way in which we determined how much money we would put into the system, and it's called backloading. We funded at a level percent of payroll growth as opposed to a level dollar, and we didn't get any payroll growth. We anticipated people would be making more money and there would be more people in the system, and that didn't happen. Now, to put that in very simple terms, that would be like each one of you, when you bought your first home, you went to the banker, and no banker on the planet would do this, but it would be if you could have convinced your banker and said, I want to mortgage my home. I want my mortgage to be based off of my percent of income. Now, I know that I'm not making very much money now. I'm only making $30,000 a year, and I want this $200,000 home, but if you will just base my mortgage off a percent of my income, think how well off I'm going to be down the road. I'm going to get, pretty soon, I'm going to be making $40,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000. I'll have more than enough money to pay this mortgage off. Now, isn't that smart? Let's do it based off of my income. You're going to get ahead. Well, guess what? If you never got that raise or you got fired, that formula was never going to work. But that's the way we funded our pension systems, on a level percent as opposed to a level dollar. So if you take our funding, the direct appropriation from the state of Kentucky, and you take this backloading that we did, that's 40% of the problem. Another 22% of the problem was actuarial assumption changes. Now what that means is, if you have in your formula that you're going to make 7.5%, and you only make 6%, well, then you got to adjust your formula, and when you do that, you're exposing yourself to more liability. So assumptions were a huge part of this. We didn't have payroll growth. We weren't making the rate of return that the assumptions provided for. Our mortality rate wasn't what we thought it was going to be. People were living longer, drawing down on their pensions longer. This represented a big part of the problem. We didn't pre-fund COLAs, which means if you got a cost of living increase, great, good for you, but if you didn't pre-fund it, you were going to get in trouble. If I make you a promise, if I tell you that I'm going to give you $10 a week for the rest of your life, I better have that $10 in my pocket. I can't hope that I'm going to get it because I made a promise to you. And if I don't have it, chances are I'm not going to be able to keep that promise. So we didn't pre-fund COLAs. That was nearly 10% of the problem. And then we anticipated, not only did we anticipate we were going to get a certain percent of return on our investments, but we also anticipated that the market was going to perform at a certain rate, that the market was going to grow. And the market for several years didn't grow. So that hurt. And all of this together eroded our pension systems to the situation that we're in now. Now, granted, we had a lot of baby boomers in the system, and they were retiring out, so we had a lot of payouts and didn't have the income to support it. And two other factors that are flying under the radar screen when you talk to really smart people, and I don't honestly consider myself one of them. I've just studied up on the issue and have tried to learn as much as I can about it. But two other issues that are flying under the radar screen that have had great influence on our pension systems as well is enhanced benefits. Now, we do some dumb things in Frankfurt, and we just can't help ourselves sometimes, I guess, But we were enhancing benefits and not providing for those enhancements. So in other words, you have a benefit factor, your whole formula, years of service, average income, average wages times a factor, certain factor. Well, if you hired in at a benefit factor of 1.5, but you retired out because we enhanced the benefit factor 10 years later at 2.5, that causes a problem because we didn't provide any funding for that. And then we didn't, we were ambitious in our inflation rate, and we didn't get the inflation rate in our assets that we thought that we should. So it's a combination of all of these things that have gotten us to where we are in this short period of time. So how do we get out? I mean, that's the answer. I mean, people want to know, okay, you've given us all the bad news. You've told us what the problem is. We got, at best, a $40 billion liability, maybe a $75 billion liability, depending on who's looking at it. And again, I want to emphasize that you go from 40 to 75 just by plugging in what you can guarantee your money is going to earn. And we know that a Treasury note will earn 2.5%. You bankers help me with this, something in that category. So if you're going to be realistic, that's what you're going to say you're actually going to get on the money that you have to invest. But we're still at, in some systems, we're at 7.25. We have made some assumption changes in KERS. It's down to 5.75 now. But even that could be ambitious. So what are we going to do to get out of this situation? Well, we don't have a lot of choices. One thing, if it were sheerly money, throwing money at this problem, which obviously that's going to be a big part of it, because 75% of the problem are people that are already retired, and another 23% of the problem are people that are currently working and they all have an inviolable contract. So to violate that inviolable contract would be unethical, probably illegal. So that's going to be tough. So 98% of the problem is already there. We can make all the structural changes we want to make, and people come to me all the time and say, why don't you do this? Why don't teachers work longer? Why don't we do this? Why don't this, that, and the other? And I say, that's fine, that's great. We can do, the sky's the limit on what we can do. But we can't change what's happened. We can't unretire the people that are retired, and the people that are in the system have an inviolable contract. So structural changes aren't going to help the situation now. This liability is not about the future. This liability is what we owe currently. So we're going to have to come up with money. But it would take a 10% tax increase or a 12% cut in services to cover this liability. 10% tax increase or 12% cut in services. And when we say 12% cut in services, that includes everything. That would include, Matt, that would include seek money, that would include everything when we talk about cutting services. So you see what the challenge is. Is there a ray of hope? Yeah, I think there is a ray of hope because we have a lot of revenue streams. Are we going to need to redirect some of our revenue streams? I think that we are. And that would be my suggestion. Do we need to restructure the tax code in such a way that it's more fair? Do we need to start charging taxes on services? Do we need to look at groceries? Do we need to look at this whole long laundry list of things? Well, we're going to have to because the options are limited, because it is going to take more money. We're going to have to change our actuarial method and assumptions, obviously. We're going to have to look at our investment practices. And prior to Senate Bill 2, we didn't know what their retirement systems were investing in, who they were investing with, or what the fees were. But now we do, because we've opened the book on it, and they have to tell us exactly what they're doing. We have to look at the benefit levels and the risk exposure, and obviously we have to look at revenue streams that can help us work our way out of this challenge. The status quo approach is not sustainable. It's just not. July the 31st is a big day for us in Frankfort because July the 31st, the group that's auditing the systems is analyzing each of the systems, is going to make their third and final report. And their third and final report is their suggestions for solutions. So come if you will, it will be a packed house because there's a lot riding on what these folks will be telling us. They've taken a deep dive into the systems. They've analyzed it every way they possibly can. And now they're going to make the suggestions on what we need to do to get out of the situation that we're in. It's not going to be easy. And every one of these figures that I've given you, there's a real life behind it. There's a family behind it. There's a promise behind it. There's people that are depending on this. So that makes the calculus very tough. That's the situation. It's not pretty, but you need to know, because not only will it have an impact on you as business people, but if you're in the system, you're on pins and needles, and I understand that. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. I would ask for your support and your prayers and your advice. Thank you all very much.